Everybody chose to live here in Hebron because they got a great deal on a penthouse. Anybody that lives here are people that are here because of a connection to the land and to our fathers and mothers, and here for a reason. Behind every other door here is another story of selflessness, of people that are scholars in Torah, people that are super connected, that their life are life of ideals. It's always amazing to see the soldiers that serve here. After 2 weeks that they're here, there's something about walking and protecting the streets that are full of 4,000 years of Jewish history that really touches you, and it doesn't stop touching you. I served in the army between the years 1991, 1995. We were on our massacre, the journey to merit to receive the beret of your unit. On the second night of this journey, where we were brought to a small patch in the forest where we were served dinner. It was a very traumatic dinner. From all over, people are crying. Third night of Hanukkah, instead of being home or being with friends and having jelly donuts and latkes and just home warmth and Hanukkah celebration, here we are in the forest. Suddenly, really out of nowhere, I hear music. And like out of some kind of a action movie, a mitzvah tank rolls into the forest. Out jump a few Hasidim, Lubavitchers. They take out a menorah and they take out a tray of hot sufganiyot donuts. And what was amazing, that myself and all my friends, that a minute ago we don't have the strength to even get up and continue to march. Everybody's dancing and singing. Despite the fact that we're talking about 28 years ago, I clearly remember saying to myself, one day when I finish this army, I'm going to join that army. Is really being in a position, being a voice for the global Jewish community, showing love and appreciation to the many hundreds, sometimes thousands of soldiers that serve in this region, to make sure that they leave Hebron not only with military experience, but an experience of connection, of Hebron, chibur. If it's assisting them physically, if it's bringing out coffee in the night to their posts, if it's giving them warm clothing that they may be missing, being able to provide that connection and understanding to the soldiers is really my biggest hope.
Live from the front lines of Hebron, where he welcomes one and all. Thank you, Rabbi Cohen, for welcoming us all here tonight. And please inspire us.
All right,
from destruction to construction.
I'll try. All right, so after watching that video, you might come under the impression that all that the soldiers do all day in Hebron is hug Chabad people coming to visit them. It's not quite that situation yet. We're getting there, but we'll talk about that in a few moments. So there's a famous saying from our sages that when the month of Av, the Hebrew month of Av comes in, we lessen in joy. There's many, many laws that have to do with the 9 days that control our natural joyous situation. And, Hasidim in a very typical way that change every situation into a joyous one, even the most sorrowful ones. That's really the, besides that story you saw in the video, what attracted me to this group called Chabad in the first place, a bunch of guys that are always looking for a party. You all know that. So Hasidim take that saying of our sages and just put a comma, take a comma and put it in that Hebrew sentence in a different place that changes the whole meaning of the sentence. That when when one wants to lessen the sorrow of the month of Av, how do you do that? By creating joy. So l'chaim, and it's not alcohol, but and it says that when 10 Jews gather together, the God's presence dwells amongst us. So definitely with hundreds of people, definitely the largest Zoom gathering that I ever joined. I think that, if you would have told not our grandparents or our parents, if you, even to us, 25, 30 years ago, that 30 years down the road, this is going to be possible, this kind of Zoom meeting, we would say that this is the day, that's exactly, that's the redemption, that's Mashiach. So we're getting there. The catchy title that Rabbi Pinney gave to this evening really symbolizes the whole Hasidic approach for the way to change the situation, to bring out how to bring the redemption. And if in former generations the focus was on the destruction and on the sorrow and mourning, now the focus in our generation is on the construction. Of course, we are obligated to the laws of sorrow during these days of Av, but those are the ones that serve to remind us of how broken we should be, that we're not yet at a complete state of redemption of the Holy Temple, of where the Jewish people should be. But on the other side, the emphasis is mainly on progressing and construction. So there's a famous, again, another saying from our sages that teaches us that when one, after 120 years, may we all have long lives, goes upstairs, one of the questions that is asked is, did you yearn, did you anticipate the redemption? Okay, the question isn't, did you wait or wait patiently? Did you anticipate? Did you wake up in the morning and you were disappointed that you didn't wake up to a different world? And did you act in a way of anticipation and not just waiting passively? Did you do anything to make sure that this world is going to change? So by Chabad Hasidim, or anybody, I think, that was touched by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, this question is not only asked after 120, but it's a question that was asked by the Rebbe and demanded by the Rebbe for over 40 years. And the words of the righteous continue beyond their life in this world. And definitely we're all inspired still from that yearning and anticipation, that demand to make a change, to change the world, and to bring finally the era that our prophets promise us and talk about so in such great length in the Bible, about the world that comes to a change, the world that really, really makes a transformation into a world of unity, a world of peace, a world of harmony. And the way to get there is by not stopping to anticipate, not stopping to work. How do we get that drive? We do live in this world. It's one thing, I'm sure that it was much easier when Jews in previous generations, Baruch Hashem, we were spared from that. But when Jews went through inquisitions and pogroms and Holocaust, it was kind of much easier to yearn and anticipate for a change and a redemption and just getting out of this situation. But living in the United States of America or Australia and even Israel with all its challenges, and living in prosperity and living in things that our grandparents and great-grandparents did not enjoy, how do you keep that suspense? How do you keep that anticipation? So I'll just, I asked Rabbi Pinney permission to share this short video. One of the ways, I'll just share with you, one of the ways that I keep myself inspired, and I'm sure many shluchim and Chabad and people around the world, this is also a source of inspiration. I want to invite you to join me and watch a very short 2.5 minute video from the Rebbe. about how one should anticipate and work towards that change. And what we're about to see is the words coming from, obviously, the righteous person of our generation, a great Jew, that not only waited, but anticipated and demanded and worked 24/7 to bring to that change. Let's put that on.
Der Ragachover teilnimmt an der Linie von Binyan Beis Hamikdash und Churban Beis Hamikdash, Churban Beis Hamikdash, das hat aber Nimshach. Es ist nicht der Pshat, dass der Beis Hamikdash Chorb geworden mit Karge 2000 Jahre zurück. Und von damals hat man an Avelis Yeshor, bei der Pfarrer kommt Tischebov und die 3 Wochen bei Kajitze bei Bechol Jem, sagt man, es ist seine Ideen und Mispal alle Gjule Bechule. Auf eine Sache, was hat getroffen, mit Hecher 1900 Jahren zurück, sagt nein. Der Churban Beis Hamikdash ist das Bechol Jem wa Jem, bemeldet davon verstandig, was es darf sein, der Geschrei, ad Mose Bechol Jem wa Jem. Und sagt dass sogar ein Befehl in Jerusalem, das steht in Jerusalem, der Kol Mi, שלניבנה ביס המקדש בזמן, הזכיר לחורה ביס המקדש בזמן. דורגה 1900 Jahre, mit noch Jahren lachen sie. Wie bald aber jem Chamishi Pasche Pinchas, und schon lachen vieles Meire. Wir lehnen Nivna Beis Hamikdash, darf ihm wissen sein, dass es darf sein, der Geschrei, auf der Geulo, Kiilo Chora bei jem Chamishi Pasche Pinchas. Und wie bald hat sie noch am Nächten geschrien hat Mose, und nicht Nächten geschrien hat Mose, und Kola Yom Shalifni sei geschrien hat Mose. Danach Rachman al-Islam, Chora Beis Hamikdash, heint in der Früh oder heint bei Tag, ist davon verstandig, was es darf sein, der Geschrei hat Mose Yitzre. Bekommen es nicht ein von Abschätzung, dass Allah in Teire. Als in Teire steht, Mischel Nivna Beis Hamikdash beyond. Ist Kilo, Kach, Kach. Stellt mir sich vor, Beschaß, was Nisra Beis Hamikdash. Und dabei steht da Jid, was ist ein harter Ried, ein strenger Ried mit allem, woever. Und seht, was ist der Chora Beis Hamikdash beyond. Wollt sich gekehrt der Welt. Sagt Teiras Hemes und Teiras Chaim, Yeroba Chaim, Kera Welt Heim.
Back on. Switch.
Danny, you're on.
Okay. So I think, the Rebbe in his very, very powerful words, if I may say so, it's a constant reminder to every Jew in the world, no matter how prosperous and how, easy life is or seems to be, never to be satisfied as long as there's a lack of unity amongst the Jewish people, as long as there's suffering, as long as in the land of Israel, there's still a constant alertness for war or terror. As long as my son, who was an officer in the paratroopers, has to train his soldiers, I know it's totally out of context, I just have to brag about that. But as long as he still has to train his soldiers every single day to be prepared every moment to offense and to defend, as long as in the holiest places in Yerushalayim, it's still dangerous for a Jew to walk around. And until we have the third temple, we can't be satisfied and we have to continue our work to make that happen. Okay, so it's obvious that I was invited mainly because my expertise on Hebron, I would say, our beloved and holy and very challenging city of our fathers and mothers of Hebron, the place where our father Abraham established by the first real estate transaction that was recorded in history by buying the field of Machpelah for the burial of his wife Sarah. And, you know, Hebron, the second holiest city for the Jewish people. And so I'm going to talk about that. You know, today, divine providence, I don't think that, I definitely didn't plan, and I don't think Rabbi Penny either, but is the 7th day of the month of Av. So exactly 91 years ago, the previous Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, came to Hebron as part of his visit to the Holy Land. He was visited in the Holy City in Hebron. And he's taken to around the city, visiting his Hasidim living there, visiting the other communities, the Jewish communities there. We're talking about 1929, mid-August, exactly 11 days before the terrible pogrom that destroyed the community in Hebron, that we'll talk about in a moment. And despite the fact that he was greeted very warmly by the Arab dignitaries, he's in fact, the previous Chabad Rebbe is the only Jew that's really, at least that we're knowledgeable of, that's recorded, that was allowed to have entry inside the site of Machpelah, the burial site of our fathers and mothers, the second holiest site of the Jewish people. From the year 1267 to 1967, exactly 700 years, any non-Muslim, not only a Jew, but any non-Muslim was not allowed inside the site of Machpelah. There is, anybody that visits there today, there is still the southern corner is nicknamed the 7th step. Why is it nicknamed like that? Because there was a row of stairs leading into the site, and at the 7th step, there was a sign in English, in Arabic, declaring that any non-Muslim is not allowed beyond this point. You can in fact Google this topic, and there's footage that was taken actually, I think in 1914, where you can actually see Muslim guards standing there on the 8th step and just making sure that the Jews that are praying there don't take one step forward. So there's many stories throughout the ages of Jews that disguised themselves or bribed themselves their way in. But the only one that we know about that was actually welcomed inside with openly as a Jew is the previous Rebbe. And despite that, in the diary that describes his visit there, it's told that how he, once he gets out of the vehicle that brought him there, he says, "I smell blood." And 11 days later, a tragic pogrom occurred in the city of Hebron, the city that had the most continuous Jewish presence in the world, definitely in the land of Israel. I mean, according to the historians, we're talking about from the days of King David, that his first 7.5 years of being king started out in Hebron before he was accepted as the king of all of Israel, and not just of the kingdom of Judea, and then he moved to Jerusalem. But from those days till 1929, there's basically almost always a continuous presence of Jews in the city. Sometimes we're talking about 4 or 5 families. It was never easy living in Hebron. I always tell this to visitors that come to us, that not today and not in the past, hopefully in the near future, but nobody ever chose to live in Hebron because they got a great deal on a penthouse. And it was always because of a strong connection to the history, the streets that carry 4,000 years of our heritage and our history, and in such a condensed area, the most in the world that carries such a part of Jewish history. This was all very violently and tragically cut off in 1929. It's really a topic that could be discussed. I'm going to try and give it in a nutshell, you know, I have to make one remark that is always brought up, at least when I get into discussions with people, what you would call a political discussion. For us, this is not politics. This is our land. This is our life. This is our soul. But when people tell me that, you know, you may be right, it's your homeland and all that, but if only Israel would leave Judea and Samaria, the biblical part of Israel, what the world would call the occupied territories, everything would be fine. There'd be Palestine, there'd be Israel. And I always ask in return, if that's the case, then what exactly upset the Arabs of Hebron in 1929? We're talking about a Jewish community, 1,500 people, really living like in the shtetl, people learning, people working, a very poor community, no Israeli flag, no settlements, no IDF. And in fact, Hebron was known to be of a place that there was the least, what you would call Zionist activism in those days in the late 20s. And yet, in one weekend, this community was destroyed. 67 Jews were killed, hundreds were wounded. The modern Jewish community in Hebron that returned to the city in the early 80s, which is a story on its own, actually put in a big effort, mainly 20 years ago, 15 years ago, to try and record and get as much interviews as possible, like it was done on the Schindler's List with survivors of the massacre. So I've seen a lot of that footage, and everybody, we're talking about horrific stories. We're talking about violence that, that's a Nazi-like, going in and cutting off limbs and just whatever, without getting into that. Anybody that wants to broaden his knowledge on the subject could Google it. It's there's a lot of information out there, but in a terrible, terrible way. One thing repeats itself in all the interviews is that how shocked they were that their same friends and their same neighbors that they did business with, that they even participated in their same, in one another's happy occasions, were the ones that would be part of the crowd or led the crowd into the homes and murdering and wounding the Jewish community of Hebron. Probably the most tragic part of the story is that, and that really, I think, emphasizes this point of the way they lived there and felt there, is that a week or so before the pogrom actually occurred, there was a delegation of the members of the Haganah, one of the undergrounds that operated under the Jewish British mandate that in those days focused on providing defense to Jews. These are the days already when the British mandate kind of switched their approach to the solution in Palestine and sided with the Arabs. Another long topic, but basically they come to the Jewish leaders in Hebron and they tell them, we have information that there's going to be unrest, there may be riots, there's going to be violence. Nobody dreamt in their darkest dreams that what took place would actually, that's what's going to happen, but they said, we're here. We want to bring in around 30 men that are going to be armed, that will be here and protect you. And the tragedy is, and you can't really blame them because they did enjoy a long period of more or less coexistence, is that the Jewish leaders told them, basically, what are you talking about? These are people that work with us. These are our friends. And furthermore, by you standing here and with your weapons, that's what's going to provoke them. And unfortunately, they were sent away, leaving the Jews of Hebron defenseless. So, in a kind of a U-turn that I want to make, because that's really the topic of tonight, of how to make that U-turn from destruction to construction. So I want to share with you a short story or two that really, brings that point out. Both stories have to do with Sefer Torah. So right almost under our house where we live, me and my wife Batsheva and our 5 boys and 1 girl, 6 kids, is the synagogue of, it's called Bet Knesset Avram Avinu, named after our father Abraham. And anybody that comes and visits there today could open up the Holy Ark and see very special Torah scrolls. And one of them in particular is special because not only is it estimated to be over, I think, close to 250 years old, but also it is actually, this Torah scroll is a survivor from 1929. Basically what happened is that after a 24-hour of this bloody riot, finally, the British police that were nowhere to be seen during the riots finally show on scene, basically shoot a few shots in the air and the crowd disperses. Had they had done that 24 hours before, history would have looked different for the Jews of Hebron. And then they gathered all the survivors and the wounded people to one of the Chabad properties in Hebron, one of the largest ones. The Chabad community existed in Hebron from 1823 to 1929. Many of the properties where Jews live today, where you could visit today, are actually registered as Schneerson property, as really the household of the Rebbe. And then the British officers took a group of Jews that weren't hurt, and they went from house to house and from different institutions, synagogues, to see if there's any survivors that weren't found yet, or maybe articles that weren't looted. And after that, gathered everybody again, sending them on trucks to Jerusalem, and basically with no one knowing if ever to return again. One of the places that they go to search for anything surviving is the synagogue of Avraham Avinu that was built 500 years ago by Jews that came from Spain after the Spanish expulsion of Sephardic Shul, one of the most famous synagogues in Israel, that thank God in the 80s was rebuilt to almost the exact way it was before it was destroyed. They come into the synagogue, and again, you could Google it, and they see the scenes of the pogrom and the burnt furniture and everything. And the young man by the name of Chaim Friedman runs to the Holy Ark, and he's so happy to see that kind of hiding in the corner is the most special Torah scroll of the community. And he takes it out, and as he's walking out with it, the British officer asks him, so that looks like a expensive piece of antiquity. What are you going to do with it? How, what's the price? I guess he offered him to buy it. And he says, I'm not selling this. He says, what are you going to do with it? He says, one day I'm going to bring back here. And he said, basically, crazy, you Jews are never returning here to Hebron. But I heard this story from people that were present at the moment. I'm not sure, I think it was 1980 or 1981 when they rededicated the synagogue after the rebuilding. In the middle of the ceremony, without anyone expecting it, an elderly Jew comes in with his son and grandson, and it's the same Chaim Friedman with that Sefer Torah, puts it back in the Holy Ark, and really that Torah carries the story of Hebron, past, present, and future. I think I'm gonna skip we're just the second story. Maybe we'll go back to that later. I'll just tell you, the Jewish community in Hebron today, I'm sure many of you have visited there, but basically are living in the same properties. I mean, you might, if you, your source of information is only CNN and other kinds of sources like that, then basically you'd come under the impression that we're all living in houses that we stole from local Arabs. In fact, any Jew that's living in Hebron today is living in properties that were owned or that are deeds to of Jews that lived in Hebron throughout the generations. For instance, our family lives in an actual house that served as a Talmud Torah, a school of Torah for young children. And today there's around 70 families in Hebron, without getting into a long, painful and political discussion. But basically, any government that served in Israel from the Six-Day War till today, nobody could ignore the importance of the city historically and spiritually. I mean, it was David Ben Gurion, not some rabbi, that said these words, that Hebron is the younger sister of Jerusalem. And he said these exact words, that we would commit a crime to our history if we do not rebuild Hebron. These words were said a few years later. So no one could ignore, but on the other side, being that this is still to this day, unfortunately, and me and my wife, we always like to say in a very casual way when we're asked where we're from, Hebron, like, you would say Miami Beach. And there's always a reaction, and there's, Hebron doesn't leave somebody apathic. And we're yearning for the day that really when people think about Hebron, they won't think about conflict and terror and demonstrations, but they'll think about what it really is. It's the place that, according to Kabbalah, is where all our prayers come through, the place where our history starts and continues, and so on and so forth. So there's there's only 70 Jewish families living in the old city in Hebron today. There's 5 minutes away is the modern city of Kiryat Arba, where there's another 8,000 Jews. But in the biblical part, or in the part where people lived up until 1929, there's only 70 families, not because there's not enough Meshuganas that want to go and live in that place. In fact, believe it or not, there's a long waiting list, but due to the fact that this is, if you want to take 1 square mile in the whole land of Israel, maybe the whole Middle East, that is the microcosmos of the whole, Middle Eastern situation. When if you look from a satellite view and see Israel from above in a tiny spot, that's the situation in Hebron. 10,000 Jews living amongst around 200,000 Arabs, and the tensions and the conflict and all that. But yet at the same time, and this is something that as a Jew throughout the generations, we always have to deal with balancing, on one side, definitely in a place like Hebron, the feeling of holiness and connection and energy and spirituality, but also on the other side, the reality and the situation. And it's, definitely challenging to live in a place like that. But even though there's some visitors that come, and before especially people that come for the first time, so some of them might, we heard this kind of remarks not once and not twice, that, hey, you guys probably did something real wrong that Chabad HQ sent you to Hebron. Like the guys that had it right, they made it to Broward County. You guys are so. For us, really, Hebron is very far from being a punishment assignment. It's with all its challenges, the privilege of bringing up our family. When we came there, our oldest, the officer that I mentioned before, was a 3-year-old boy, bringing up our family in the streets that carry 4,000 years of history, that every step that you take is meaningful, is tremendously rewarding, being in a place where so many visitors, and really that one day is never the same as the other. Sometimes we would actually hope for a more boring period, especially when there's tensions and stuff like that. But I think that our main reward is what you saw in that video in the beginning, that our community are all wearing green. In our community, I think that, one of the, we're Jews from different backgrounds and different opinions, but I think that we could all agree that these chevra, these guys that, when I was in the army, I had in my unit guys that did not want to be combat soldiers, but because their health profile fit the criteria, they were taken into the unit against their will. Some of them dropped out later on. Basically, today, the situation in the IDF is that there's not one soldier that's in an infantry unit or a combat unit that did not choose to be so. So these guys could have chosen a much easier job. Any army in the world, definitely in Israel, I think more than 70% or definitely 70% of the army are not in combat positions. These guys that sometimes, lack basic Jewish knowledge and can't really explain to you why they're willing to give over their lives to defend their land and their people, chose to do so. for us, it really is the greatest privilege and excitement to that this is our community and this is our Shabbos guests and these are the people. It's not easy because every four months our community rotates. In Hebron, there's at any given time around 500 security personnel. By the way, their job is not only to protect the Jewish community and not only protect the hundreds of thousands of tourists that come every year. Their job, and this you could hear from high officers, is to make sure, unfortunately, in the past 2 decades and more, 3 decades, a vast majority, I don't know, vast majority, at least I'd say 50% of terror attacks that were carried out all over the country originated from the Arab parts of Hebron that, as we know, has always had a history of, extreme Jewish and Israeli hatred. And God forbid there wouldn't be a strong presence there. It would be felt even more in Tel Aviv and Netanya, not just in the Jewish community in Hebron. So our service to them, they're soldiers. They're not exactly just people that have the time on their hands. They're very busy talking about, if you ask, I think if the IDF would carry a survey amongst combat soldiers, what is the hardest position to be during their service? So Hebron would definitely reach the top 3. It's not only a place where there's long hours of standing in their sometimes lone post for up to 6 hours alone. It's also being in a situation where you're constantly monitored on a daily basis. I mean, not now during the Corona time, but on a daily basis, there's, I'd say, 3 groups of anti-Israel, pro-BDS supporting that are taking videos of the soldiers. And it's really, really a tough situation for an 18, 19-year-old Israeli kid. It's not an easy place. And therefore, we feel that our service to them is something that is very, very valuable. And today, after we're there already for 20 years, there's literally tens of thousands of Israelis that are walking around Israel or back or trekking around India and Thailand. And when you say the word Chabad, Hebron, they have a smile on their face, because one of the main activities by us is that we have a group of boys that volunteer, and their job is to go around to the different posts and to visit the soldiers and to come with refreshments and obviously come with tefillin and come with a smile. And it's mainly felt at night, the long nights that these soldiers serve. There's always, at any given time, if you happen to wander around Hebron at 2 a.m., you'll always see 2 young Lubavitchers that are driving around with a car and stopping by every post with coffee, with cake, with sometimes spending 20 minutes with a soldier, sometimes spending 2 hours, and just giving them encouragement and making sure that they understand that their service is appreciated not just by the community of Hebron, but really by Jews worldwide. Actually, that video that was shown, so a few years ago, I spoke at Chabad of San Francisco by my friend, Rabbi Yosef Langer. And it wasn't this video, it was another video, but that I showed something that I used as PR. And basically the video is very positive and dancing and hugging and soldiers and giving out jelly donuts and showing the positive side of Hebron, which really, that's what we connect to. And all of a sudden, somebody that I kind of, while I was talking, I recognized him. He looked like a familiar face. He gets up, and as I'm finishing the talk, and he says, Rabbi, I want to say something. And I tell him, remind me, who are you? Who are you? And he says, listen, I know you're not going to remember me because there's so many thousands of soldiers that rotate that you've met over the years, but my name is Alon, and I was a commander of a platoon in Tel Romeda, one of the bases in Hebron. And then he turns to the people sitting in the room and he said, listen, let me tell you the real story. In that video, you see the positive side, you see the beauty, you see the dancing. But let me describe to you. And then, basically, if I would have a annual dinner, this would be my guest speaker. I'm trying to track down this guy since that happened. So if you happen to be in that crowd, please contact me. I'd like to hire you. But basically, he got up and he says, let me tell you the real story. And he gives a description of how hard it is and how basically a soldier standing there for 6 hours and what's demanded of them to be during that whole period of time and sometimes standing alone is on constant alertness that maybe, God forbid, somebody's going to take a shot at you. Maybe there's going to be a situation that you're going to have to run and attack or defend or whatever it is. And he just described the whole tension and all that. And really, for me, that was worth the whole trip to San Francisco, and whatever fundraising that was done there was just a plus. So I want to end off, my part with, first of all, about, a word about this way Hebron. You come to Hebron today, and unfortunately, because of the conflict, there's many, many restrictions on Jewish development in the city, which was almost zero. When you walk from the cave of Machpelah, which is our local synagogue, to, for instance, our home in the Avram Avinu neighborhood, which is a 5-minute walk, as many people described it to me, it looks like a Hollywood set, the graffiti and the abandoned stores and just it does not look like a city befitting its title of the second holiest city for the Jewish people in the world. And, I'm a Chabad rabbi, I'm not a politician, not running for office, but whatever we could do to fulfill actually all the Chabad leaders, the Chabad Rebbes throughout the generation, put an emphasis to develop not only the spiritual side, but also the physical side of the city. And therefore, that is something that we take upon ourselves as a mission. And actually, while we're speaking, not while we're speaking, it's 3:30 a.m., but in a few hours, construction that we started or renovations that we started in January on the only Jewish property that's situated on Me'arat HaMachpelah. Many of you visited there, known that as the Gutnik Center, where the pizza shop is. We're basically the only show in town, but it's on the original field of Machpelah, is going through a major development to turn into, hopefully, God willing, a beautiful, beautiful Chabad welcome center with, I'm not going to get into now a whole propaganda speech, but with a soldier's lounge and a, information booth and a restaurant and a hall and so on and so forth. So if anybody wants to actively take part in turning destruction into construction, then please, you could contact me or use that link that was just put on the video. So I just want to end now for real. There's a prayer that is said actually by Sephardic Jews. It's in every Sephardic Siddur, which is called the Ptichat Eliyahu. Chabad say most of that prayer on Erev Shabbat, before Shabbat comes in, or as it comes in. But there's a part that this is only comes up in, you'll see it in a Sephardic Siddur that's used by Jews that originate from Morocco, from Tunis, from Iraq. And whatever, I'm not going to quote the whole thing, but just to end off on this note, that it's quoting Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai from Meron, that's buried in Meron, the composer of the Zohar, of the main composing book of Kabbalah, that basically it describes in a very poetic way how he gets up, arises, and cries out to those that are buried in Hebron, that and he says, awaken from your sleep, because you are from the people, you are from the righteous people that are not considered dead, but just sleeping. That's why you are called the slumberers of Hebron. And wake up together with Moshe Rabbeinu, with our prophet Moses, and wake up God, that he should bring the redemption to the Jewish people. And it goes on describing how God immediately answers and quotes verses that bring out the message of redemption. And then basically this prayer says how God tells Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and all people in Israel. It quotes a verse from Psalms, from Tehillim, Sheroshi nimlatal, that my head is full of dew. And he asked, what does it mean that your head is full of dew? That God's head, there's dew, that it's wet? But, and this is what God says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, that you, the Jewish people, thought that from the day that our holy temple was destroyed, I went up to my house and I just went and I took a step back and I'm looking at everything from above. You should know that that is not the situation. That as long as you are in exile, as long as you're not totally redeemed, I am with you. And what is there? How can I prove it to you? Here, you could touch my hair and see, obviously in a very symbolic way, you could touch my hair and see that it's wet, which means that I was outside with the Jewish people during their whole exile. So all we need to do is hold on strong, know that Hashem is with us, never to stop, anticipate and demanding from himself, and mainly burning and yearning for the day that our world is going to change to redemption and unity and peace. And when finally that day comes, then Hebron will not be remembered for conflict and terror, but it will be remembered for Hebron, from the Hebrew word of chibur, chaver, a friend, a connection, and that's what it really is in the inner dimensions of the city and the way we see it. And the main thing is that before the fast, we should already experience what's described, that one of the first stops that, like we just read, the Mashiach will make is in Hebron, to wake up our fathers and mothers, and together we're going to all dance and meet in Jerusalem. And I'm a priest and I'm a Cohen, so I'm just going to end off. First of all, I'll greet you there at the Holy Temple, but I want to end off with a blessing of the Kohanim to all of you and to all of the beautiful communities that you come from. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר לאהרון ולבניו לאמור, כה תברכו את בני ישראל, אמור להם, יברכך אדוני וישמרך, יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונקה, יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום, ושמו את שמי על בני ישראל ואני אברכם. לחיים.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Danny. Thank you for staying up for us tonight. And may your words truly ring true, that this year Mashiach does come, and we are joined with our forefathers from Hebron into the Holy City of Jerusalem for the third and final Holy Temple with the coming of Mashiach. I do want to say a couple of things, if I may. One is, as I mentioned before the class, that last year, as you know, I was with you for Tisha B'Av. So the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, I was with you.
That was one happy Tisha B'Av.
It was. Because we actually, for those who really want to know, I traveled to Jordan. I took my family, 19 of us, to go visit the graveside of Moses' brother, whose yahrzeit right before Tisha B'Av. And we were in Jordan, and they wouldn't let us out. And we were fighting at the border for more than 3 hours. And it was a Friday, and we literally pulled into Hebron minutes before Shabbos, all of us, and we had a Shabbos I'll never forget.
You could have ended up the chief rabbi in Jordan.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to open Chabad of Jordan. Anyhow, but I just want to say, so last year we were with you for just before Tisha B'Av, and on Tisha B'Av, we did it in a tunnel in Jerusalem, and we couldn't even go into that tunnel. We read the book of Lamentations at the closest door to where the Holy Temple stood. And we did it with Simcha.
Right, my neighbor, the famous Hebron, Rabbi Hochbaum.
Rabbi Hochbaum, and they wouldn't let us in for 2 hours or maybe more. So my prayers are, first of all, that we shouldn't be restricted from the streets of Jerusalem. May all the Jewish people be able to march there proudly, once again, with the third and final Holy Temple. I want to bring one more point, if I may. And there was a thought of the day from the Rebbe a couple of days ago. And it says, why are the Jews not allowed to go up on the Temple Mount? The temple is destroyed. And he writes there that even though the building is there, but the spirit and the soul of the Jewish people and the holiness is still there. That has never left. The only thing that's missing is the building. So the soul is already there, the holiness, the kedusha is there. May it be restored in its full glory, and may the third and final holy temple truly descend from heaven, so that we can not only feel and that honest that we feel when we go there, that's not the real deal. That's not the real thing. We want to see it in its full glory with the building of the third and final holy temple.
Amen.